I want to turn now to the other big story of the morning. Yesterday's first hearing before the special master in the case of the documents seized by the FBI during the search of former President Donald Trump's Florida home and club. Judge Raymond Dearie, who Trump wanted as the special master, pressed Trump's attorneys to promptly provide more answers about whether the former president did or did not declassify documents marked top secret found at Mar-a-Lago, saying, quote, "You can't have your cake and eat it." If they want to argue the documents might not still be secret. Trump's attorneys have argued that answering that question now would put them at a disadvantage in the face of a possible future criminal prosecution or a future legal fight over getting seized documents returned to Trump. Trump has claimed on social media that he declassified the records he had, but his lawyers have yet to formally make that claim in any sworn court filings. Judge Dearie didn't issue any rulings at the hearing, but appeared skeptical about Trump's contention that he had declassified the more than 100 highly sensitive documents in question found at Mar-a-Lago, some marked top secret. And while Trump's filing claimed neither side had provided a showing the documents are classified, Judge Dearie said the government had presented evidence the documents are because they bear classification markings. This is kind of basic. You could see it right on the files. Judge Dearie saying, quote, "As far as I'm concerned, that's the end of it, unless Trump's team has some evidence to the contrary." Trump's lawyer suggested Dearie's push to get details on claims about declassification was going beyond Judge Aileen Cannon's order. But Judge Dearie disagreed, saying, quote, "I'm taken aback by your comment that I'm going beyond what Judge Cannon instructed me to do. I think I'm doing what I was told to do." Joining us now, senior legal affairs reporter at Politico, Josh Gerstein, and former U.S. Attorney, senior FBI official, Chuck Rosenberg. I guess, first of all, Chuck, can we just start with some basics here? Is there anywhere in our government documents and basic values, rules, laws, anywhere where a president can just wave a wand and declassify documents himself and take them to his club?
Well, it's good to start with basics, Mika. So presidents have declassification authority, but not in this way. And by the way, and you made this point, I think, abundantly clear just a moment ago, if the president, in fact, declassified this or tried to declassify it or declassified some of it, number one, there would be a process. And number two, there would be evidence that it happened. Federal judges are used to having people answer their questions in court. And the things that work at a political rally or in a playground don't work before a federal judge. So when he asked simply, is there any evidence that this has been declassified, he should have gotten an answer. And when he didn't, it told him everything he needed to know, that it never happened. If it did happen, they would tell him. And so, Mika, I think there's a couple of problems here. First, the Trump folks aren't going to get away with evading answers to logical questions. And two, because there's no evidence that he declassified these documents, the judge is quite right. The evidence lines up, stacks up in favor of the government. As you point out, this stuff is marked. And by the way, it's the government, the current government, the administration of President Biden that gets to say what is and what is not classified. So I think a very poor showing by the Trump lawyers in court, in large part, if not exclusively, because they just don't have the facts to back up what Mr. Trump is saying on social media.
So, Josh, if you could break down what happened in court yesterday, because given what Chuck just said, I started with the basics for a reason. How could they not know that? I mean, what exactly is their defense to what the judge is now requesting, requiring, and asking for, which is basics?
Well, Mika, it seemed like the judge called this hearing with the intention of kind of putting the Trump legal team on their heels a little bit and making clear that he was going to drive the timing of this process and that they were going to have to come forward, as you were just discussing with Chuck, with some evidence if they're going to keep pushing this claim about declassification. It seemed to me sitting there in the courtroom with Judge Dearie, he was very soft-spoken, but he would offer these kind of almost caustic rebuttals sometimes to things that the Trump lawyers had said. It seemed like as defense lawyers in a case that hasn't yet been filed, right? There's no criminal charges. At this point, they had two options open to defend Trump. One is sort of an ignorance defense that maybe he didn't know exactly what documents were down there at Mar-a-Lago, and therefore he couldn't be responsible for that. And the other is this declassification claim. And which defense they want to use, I think, would depend on what charges the government brings. You know, if it's a charge about classified information, maybe they would try a declassification defense. But if it's just going to be a claim that he caused lies to be told to the U.S. government or obstruction of justice, then he might want to go in a different direction and say, you know, he didn't really know what he had. There's a lot of news clippings and memorabilia, and maybe there was something classified in those boxes, but, you know, he's a busy guy. And they just don't want to pick right now which defense they want to use. And they made that abundantly clear in the courtroom yesterday.
Yeah, and Jonathan Lemire, I think the judge seems like he wants to wrap this up. If getting the special master was sort of an attempt to drag things out so they could maybe figure out different strategies, he seems to want to get this going. I believe he even said want to wrap this up by something like October 6th.
Yeah, the hallmark tactic from the Trump legal team has always been delay, 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 delay. We've seen that in every case. And at least so far, it seems like this judge is not having it, suggesting that he would want to operate on a timetable even quicker than the one the Department of Justice proposed. So unless something changes, this may go faster than we perhaps first anticipated. Chuck, I know your assessment is that it was a bad day for the Trump legal team. Feels like we hear that a lot. So what happens now with the special master? Walk us through the next couple of steps and what, if any, recourse each side has.
Right. So Judge Dearie has a couple of things he has to do, Jonathan. He has to screen for executive privilege. I imagine there's going to be almost none of that, at least not validly so. He has to screen for attorney-client privilege. We know there's some of that. The government has already looked through some of these documents and set aside documents it believes might be subject to the attorney-client privilege. He has to make some determinations about classification, the stuff we just discussed. And then there's going to be a large group of documents that don't fit in under any of these categories. So what he has to do, Jonathan, is figure out what goes to the investigative team and what doesn't. And I imagine one way or the other, the government's going to get what's entitled to. They would like it sooner rather than later. They would like it yesterday rather than tomorrow. But they're still going to get the stuff to which they're entitled. That means the investigation is going to continue. And to the point that you were just discussing with Mika, it's going to happen relatively quickly. So delay doesn't help the government, but this is not going to be inordinate delay. And the investigation is going to continue, and the government's going to get the stuff to which it's entitled.